Before man built cities, before we tamed fire or wrote our first word, the skies burned with wings of flame. Every culture spoke their name, dragons. From China to Egypt, from Norse legends to Celtic stone carvings, beings of fire, wisdom, and fear. But here's the mystery. How did people separated by oceans, by centuries, and by language, all dream of the same creature? What if dragons were never just myths? What if they were memories? This is the story of the dragons, their birth, their rise, and their echo that still lives in our blood. The evolution of dragons. Before man built cities, before words were carved into stone, the earth itself seemed to breathe. The wind moved like a living thing, the mountains smoked, and the sea glittered with strange lights. In that half-light between fear and wonder, the first humans lifted their eyes to the horizon and saw shapes they could not explain. Something vast and alive hid in the clouds. Something hissed in the darkness of caves. They gave it a name that lived longer than empires: dragon. Fire was still young then. People believed it had a spirit, bright, hungry, almost human. When thunder cracked the sky and lightning split a tree, they thought the fire had wings. And so the idea began, a creature of flame that could fly, that could rule both heaven and earth. It was not born from books or science. It was born from fear, hope, and imagination mixed together. As tribes spread across continents, the same vision followed them. In China, ancient storytellers spoke of the loam, not a monster, but a bringer of rain, a symbol of wisdom. In the deserts of Mesopotamia, clay tablets whispered of Tiamat, the serpent of chaos, slain by the god Marduk to create the world. Far to the west, in Greece, the dragon guarded golden apples in the garden of the Hesperides. And in the frozen north, the Vikings sang of Fafnir, the cursed dragon who slept on a mountain of treasure. No one could explain how the same creature appeared in lands that never met. Yet there it was, carved into stone, painted on pottery, woven into the heart of human memory. Some say dragons were born from fossils. Imagine an ancient shepherd walking through a canyon after a storm, finding the skull of a dinosaur half buried in the earth. To his eyes it was no beast he knew, a jaw of knives, eyes deep as wells. He could only believe it had once breathed fire. Generation after generation, the stories grew around such bones, each one brighter than the last. Perhaps this is how the dead giants of prehistory rose again as the dragons of myth. But there is another truth hidden in the firelight. Early humans faced beasts that today feel like legend. Saber-toothed cats, giant crocodiles, snakes long as rivers. They lived at the mercy of things more powerful than themselves. To survive, they gave those fears a face, a single almighty creature that ruled them all. The dragon became the spirit of danger itself, the guardian of the unknown. Yet even as they feared it, they worshipped it. For every story where a dragon destroyed, another told how it protected. In China, it brought rain to feed the rice fields. In Japan, it rose from the sea to bless fishermen. In Wales, a red dragon guarded the land, its roar echoing through their flags to this day. Across the world, people saw dragons not as evil, but as balance: fire and water, death and creation, chaos and wisdom. Thousands of years later, when the first kings built their empires, they adopted the dragon as a symbol of power. Golden dragons were carved on shields, banners, and thrones. The creature that once haunted dreams became a crown. Because deep down, rulers understood what the old storytellers already knew. To control the dragon was to control fear itself. And whoever mastered fear could master the world. Still, the question burns: why do dragons feel real to us? Even now, when we have mapped the stars and dissected atoms, a picture of a dragon still makes our hearts race. Maybe the memory of those ancient predators still sleeps in our genes, a whisper from the time when we were prey. Maybe the dragon never died because it lives inside the oldest part of our mind, the part that looks into darkness and imagines wings. And so, through the ages, the dragon changed shape with us. In temples, it was divine. In medieval stories, it became the enemy of saints. Every age painted its own reflection on those scales. But one truth never changed: the dragon was always there, waiting at the edge of our imagination, where fire meets sky. The age of faith and fire. When the world grew darker, when kingdoms rose from dust and faith ruled the mind, the dragon did not vanish. It transformed. In the age of knights and kings, dragons no longer lived in the stars. They lived in the stories whispered by candlelight. Monks painted them in sacred books, curling between the letters of Latin prayers. In those pages, the dragon became evil itself, a symbol of chaos, greed, and the serpent that once deceived man. Yet, in the same breath, it was power. Every knight who wanted glory needed a dragon to fight. Without the monster, there could be no hero. Across Europe, the legend spread like wildfire. Villagers swore they saw wings in the fog. Farmers found burned fields and missing cattle. And every tale ended the same way. A brave man, a shining sword, and the death of the beast. But what if it wasn't a myth? What if, buried deep in the mountains, something still breathed? Not magic, but muscle, bone, and heat. Old chronicles speak of dragons slain in France, serpents near Rome, and a winged creature in England whose bones were kept by the church itself. Stories too specific, too detailed, to be simple imagination. And so, the dragon became more than a creature. It became a reflection of man's war with the unknown. To kill a dragon was to conquer fear itself. But every time we slayed one in story, we killed a part of our own wildness, our fire, our mystery. Still, in every cathedral painting, the dragon's eyes watched. Not defeated, only waiting. Because myths never die. They just sleep, until the world believes again. The Scientific Awakening. The year was 1824. In a quiet corner of Oxfordshire, England, a man named William Buckland bent over a strange piece of rock. It was heavy, cold, and ridged like the spine of something that no longer belonged to this world. He didn't know it then, but what he held in his hands was the key to awakening a sleeping giant. The first dinosaur fossil. For centuries, dragons had lived in legends, whispered through myths and fear. But now, for the first time, the world saw a creature that proved, maybe, just maybe, the old stories had roots in something real. Buckland called his discovery Megalosaurus, meaning great lizard. The newspapers went wild. People who once prayed for saints to slay dragons now gathered around fossil displays, staring into the jaws of prehistoric monsters. The line between legend and science blurred. For the first time in history, the dragon left the realm of faith and entered the halls of reason. But it didn't end there. Soon, across the globe, from the red deserts of North America to the cliffs of China, explorers unearthed skeletons that dwarfed every living creature on Earth. Gigantic bones, sharp claws, fossilized eggs. Evidence that once, the Earth truly was ruled by beasts that breathed fire in their own way. Not through magic, but through power, dominance, and evolution. Science had no room for myths. Yet the more it dug into the past, the more it stumbled upon shapes and stories that matched the imagination of ancient people. How did civilizations that never met, from the Vikings to the Chinese, all describe winged, scaled monsters breathing fire from the sky? They had never seen dinosaur fossils together. They had no internet, no trade of knowledge across oceans. And yet, their dragons looked eerily similar. Could the discovery of fossilized bones in ancient times have sparked these stories? A shepherd finds a massive rib bone in the desert, and suddenly, the story of a great beast is born. A child sees the skull of a Tyrannosaurus embedded in a cliff, and centuries later, it becomes a fire-breathing god. Science began to see the link. The myth of dragons might have been humanity's first attempt to explain fossils. By the mid-1800s, paleontology became the new frontier. The Great Bone Wars erupted in America, a fierce competition between scientists like Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. They battled not with swords, but with shovels and pride, racing to name new species. And what they found was beyond imagination. Gigantic skeletons of creatures with wings, pterosaurs. Serpentine beasts that swam through prehistoric oceans, Mosasaurus, Ichthyosaurus. And land titans that could crush trees with a single step, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus. Every discovery was like uncovering a new chapter of the dragon myth. But now, told in the language of geology and biology instead of legend. Then came Charles Darwin, whose theory of evolution changed everything. He showed that life didn't appear in flashes of magic, but grew, adapted, and survived through time. Dragons, in a sense, were not creatures of fantasy. They were symbols of evolution itself. They embodied nature's power to create, destroy, and adapt. And in their fossils, scientists found not demons or gods, but the story of life rising from chaos. Still, there was something haunting in it all. Even with charts and bones, even with dates and Latin names, the dragon refused to fully die. When people looked at the skeleton of a Spinosaurus, towering and long snout, or a Quetzalcoatlus, wings wider than a fighter jet, they saw something familiar. They saw the same terror and beauty that their ancestors painted in fire and myth. Science had given dragons new names, but the feeling remained the same: awe. By the late 20th century, technology added a new twist. Computers recreated dinosaurs in full motion, muscles flexing, eyes blinking, skin shimmering under sunlight. For the first time in 65 million years, dragons walked again. Not in reality, but on screens. Movies like Jurassic Park reignited the fire. Millions watched in wonder, just as ancient people once did around their village fires. The fear returned. The fascination returned. And the legend lived on, now backed by science, sound, and special effects. But here's the question scientists still whisper. Why did the dinosaurs vanish? A meteor, yes, that's the theory. But others say there was more. A chain reaction, a collapse of ecosystems, a darkness that smothered the skies. It's poetic, almost biblical. The fall of the dragons, the end of fire. Yet their legacy remains. In the scales of lizards, in the wings of birds, in the fossils that still rest beneath our feet. Dragons never truly went extinct. They just evolved, traded their fire for feathers, their roar for song. And so, the myth comes full circle. The dragons of science and the dragons of story are one and the same. A reflection of humanity's endless desire to understand the impossible. And so, from fire to fossil, from myth to microscope, the dragon's journey comes full circle. What once lived in the sky of imagination now sleeps beneath our feet. Its bones whispering the truth our ancestors could only dream of. Maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe they just saw it differently. The dragon was never a lie. It was our first glimpse into the vast story of life itself. Pause. Calm heartbeat sound fades in. If this story made you feel something, if it made you look at the world with a little more wonder, then don't let this fire fade. Subscribe to EvoVerse, because this is only the beginning. Next, we'll travel deeper, to the birth of another legend, the evolution of the phoenix, a creature born from ashes, whose story still burns in the DNA of life itself. Music swells, golden embers rise on screen. Hit like if the story moved you. Share it with someone who still believes in wonder. And tell us in the comments, what do you think dragons really were? Because here in EvoVerse, every myth has a heartbeat, and every story evolves.